Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something loads of English learners run into.
That feeling, right?
Yeah, that feeling of wanting to jump into a conversation, but you're just stuck, searching for words while the chat moves on. So we've been digging into some really interesting material aimed at helping you, the listener, speak more, fluently and feel more confident.
Exactly.
Our mission today is basically to pull out the best, most actionable tips so you can kind of ditch that mental lag and sound more natural.
Yeah, it's all about getting past that internal bottleneck, isn't it? Where your brain feels like it's juggling too many things just to say something simple.
Right.
This deep dive is really focused on the practical stuff to, streamline that whole process.
Totally. So over the next bit, we're going to explore first why it's sometimes hard to reply quickly. Then we'll get into some really solid step-by-step tips. Things like using common phrases, which is surprisingly powerful.
Oh, yeah.
How to actually think in English, which I know can feel like a huge jump.
It can.
Keeping responses short and sweet, using practice drills, tuning up your listening skills, and importantly, changing how you think about mistakes.
Yeah, that last one's big.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What are the main things, the big obstacles, that trip us up when we're trying to reply fast in English?
Well, one of the biggest ones the sources point to is this habit of translating everything in your head.
Right.
You hear English, your brain flips it to your first language, you figure out your reply there, and then you have to translate it back into English. It's a lot of steps.
It's like doing double the work mentally.
Exactly.
And it makes sense, A lot of traditional language classes focus so much on grammar, written stuff.
The rules.
Which is important, but it doesn't really train you for that quick back and forth of a real conversation. So the first key idea here is really trying to actively bypass that translation step. Try to think in English.
Precisely. And then there's the other big one, the fear of making mistakes.
Oh yeah, that can be paralyzing.
It really can. It stops people from even trying sometimes. But the material we looked at really stresses that mistakes they're not failures. They're actually part of how you learn. Signs of growth.
It's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? You want it to be perfect, so you pause, but pausing holds you back. The real shift is focusing on just communicating, getting your point across, even if it's not like perfect grammar every time.
Absolutely. Think about native speakers. We stumble over words, make little errors all the time. It doesn't stop the flow.
Good point.
And the last main hurdle, according to the sources, is simply not enough real-world speaking practice.
Right. You can know all the rules.
You can know tons of vocabulary, ace grammar tests, but if you're not actually using the language in conversation, you don't build that speed, that automatic recall.
Like knowing how to swim from a book, but never getting wet.
Exactly that. You got to jump in.
Okay, so those are the main challenges. Let's dive into the strategies, the practical stuff. Tip number 1 is about using common phrases and sentence starters.
Yeah, this one's great because it's so, actionable.
It's fascinating how these little pre-made bits of language can give you such an advantage.
They're like little linguistic building blocks or shortcuts. You can just pull them out instantly. And that buys your brain precious time to actually think about what you want to say next without leaving that, awkward silence.
Totally avoids the, yeah. And the material gives good examples like, I think, actually?
That's interesting.
From my point of view, simple stuff.
Seems basic, but it sounds so much smoother starting with one of those.
Yeah, multiple benefits. Buys you time, like you said, makes you sound more natural, less hesitant, keeps the conversation flowing.
That keeps the rhythm going.
Right, avoids those pauses that can make things feel a bit stalled.
So how do you actually start using these more? The sources suggest, practicing them.
Like rehearsing almost.
Yeah, and really listening out for them when native speakers talk. Podcasts, movies, whatever. Notice how often they pop up. Role-playing helps too, trying them out in different situations.
Even recording yourself talking can show you where you could slot them in naturally. And there are loads more examples in the source material, right? Things like, in my opinion, to be honest.
Yeah, on the other hand, I'm not sure, but that reminds me. Even phrases for agreeing, like, I agree with you, or disagreeing politely, I disagree because...
Useful stuff. I have a question I'd like to add.
Exactly. Building up your own sort of mental phrase book of these is really helpful. The more you have ready to go, the easier it is to handle different conversational turns.
Okay, great. Let's move to the second big strategy, that shift to thinking directly in English.
Yes, the big one.
This sounds daunting, I think, for a lot of learners, but the sources have some practical steps.
It is a big mental shift, definitely. But it's also where you see huge improvements in speed and how natural you sound.
Because that translation step we talked about.
It's just a major bottleneck.
Yeah.
Thinking directly in English lets you skip that whole stage. Much faster reactions.
So how do we actually retrain our brains? Immersion seems key.
Definitely. Just surrounding yourself with English. Music, movies, books, trying to find people to talk to in English. It just gets your brain used to processing in English.
Makes it the default, almost.
Kind of, yeah. It encourages those direct links between thoughts and English words, instead of always going via your native language.
And another technique mentioned is consciously trying to think in English during the day.
Right, like narrating what you're doing, but silently in your head.
Even simple stuff, like, okay, I'm making coffee now.
Exactly. Instead of thinking that in your own language, make the effort to think it in English. It feels small maybe, but doing it consistently really starts to rewire things.
The sources also suggested using English for planning, like to-do lists, or maybe reflecting on your day in English.
Yeah, anything that gets you associating your thoughts directly with English words and structures. And this ties back to the first point too. Learning whole phrases helps here.
Right, because you don't translate word by word.
Exactly, you grab the whole chunk. So practice common phrases. Use apps or phrase books that focus on them. Listen and repeat. It all builds that ability.
And what about developing automatic responses? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, those almost reflex replies, like thank you, you're welcome, no thought needed. The idea is to identify really common exchanges, practice them, maybe role play, or use flashcards until the English response just comes out automatically.
Like building muscle memory for conversation.
Pretty much. Creating strong pathways so certain English prompts trigger the right English reply without that hesitation or translation step.
Okay, third tip. This one's about keeping responses short and natural.
Sometimes simpler is better.
Yeah, there can be a tendency maybe when you're nervous to try and give these long, complex answers, but the material suggests simplicity is actually faster and often clearer.
Definitely, especially when you're still building fluency. Focus on getting the main point across clearly. Simple sentences, vocabulary you know well, it just works better.
Reduces the chance of getting tangled up. Exactly. And the sources give good examples. Like someone asks, "How was your day?" You don't need a novel.
Right.
"It was good, thanks. Yours." Perfectly fine, natural, quick. Same for agreeing, disagreeing, opinions, plans, responding to compliments. Brevity keeps the conversation moving. Less mental effort for you two.
And part of sounding natural is using those little filler words.
Oh, absolutely. Native style fillers. Things like, "I see, that's cool. Okay, got it."
Right, sure, absolutely.
We use them constantly without thinking. They smooth things over, show you're listening.
And they buy you that split second sometimes.
They do. So the advice is to practice using them. Listen for how native speakers use them, when, how often. Maybe use flashcards to remember them. Record yourself again. See if you sound natural using them.
It's about integrating them so they don't sound forced, I guess.
Yeah, they definitely help you sound more like a natural speaker and keep things flowing.
All right, tip number 4. This one sounds a bit more intense. Speed drills.
Yeah, this is about actively practicing under pressure.
Okay.
Well, the goal is to train your brain to access English faster when there's a time constraint, to get used to thinking on your feet, basically.
Makes sense. So how do you do these drills?
The sources suggest a couple of ways. One is using a timer.
Right.
Set it for a short time, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, to start and have a list of questions ready.
Yeah.
Different topics, maybe different difficulty levels, and just answer them as quickly as you can before the timer goes off.
And do it regularly.
Consistency is key, yeah. It gets you comfortable with that timed feeling, forces quicker recall.
Okay, what's the other method?
Doing rapid-fire Q&A with someone, a friend, a language partner.
Okay.
Take turns firing quick questions at each other, focus on reacting fast, keeping answers short.
More interactive.
Yeah, it can be more dynamic. And importantly, give each other feedback afterwards. Not just on speed, but clarity, naturalness.
And recording yourself during these drills is mentioned again.
Yes, super valuable. You can really track your progress, compare recordings over time here if you're getting faster, more fluent.
Pinpoint where you still hesitate.
Exactly. See where the pauses are if you're clear. And getting feedback from others on those recordings can offer insights you might miss yourself.
Okay, 5th tip. This flips things around a bit, focusing on improving listening skills.
Yeah, it seems obvious maybe, but it's crucial. Better listening equals faster understanding.
Equals faster replies.
Exactly. If you understand quickly and accurately, you just need less time to process before you can respond.
It's not just hearing the words, is it? The sources talk about understanding context, key points.
Right, grasping the bigger picture, not just individual words. And anticipation comes into play too.
Like guessing where the conversation is going.
Sort of. As you get better at listening, you can follow the flow better, maybe predict what's coming next, which gives you a head start on your own thoughts.
And confidence comes into it too, right? If you're less anxious about understanding.
You're more likely to just jump in. Less worry about missing something important, better connection with the speaker. It all helps.
So practical ways to improve listening. Podcasts.
Definitely. Choose topics you like. Try summarizing afterwards. Movies and TV shows too. Start with subtitles maybe, then try without. Focus on the dialogue rhythm.
Repeating scenes, maybe?
Good idea. And of course, real conversations. Actively seek them out. Join groups if you can.
And active listening is stress, like paraphrasing, asking questions.
Yeah, showing you're engaged.
Yeah.
Paraphrase to check understanding. So you're saying that. Ask clarifying questions. What did you mean by? Give those little cues, verbal uhs or nonverbal nods.
Shows you're tracking. And paying attention to emotional tone.
Crucial. Understanding the feeling behind the words helps you respond much more appropriately. It's not just about the information, but the intention, the emotion. Mirroring that a bit helps build rapport.
Okay, final tip, number 6. This feels really important. Changing your relationship with mistakes. Reframing that fear.
Yes. This shift in mindset can be really transformative. The sources argue strongly that mistakes aren't bad. They're actually incredibly valuable.
How so?
Well, like we touched on, they show you where your weaknesses are. They're learning opportunities, basically.
Right.
Data points showing where to focus.
Right. Feedback.
Exactly. And overcoming that fear, realizing you can communicate, even if you make a mistake, that builds real confidence over time. Plus, it's just normal. Learning involves trial and error.
So the goal isn't perfection.
It's communication. Prioritize being understood. Use simpler language if you need to. Embrace the fact that it won't always be perfect. Learn from feedback when you get it.
So how do we actually overcome that fear? Any specific strategies?
Yes, several. Practice regularly, obviously, in different situations. Set realistic goals, small steps, celebrate the wins, find supportive environment language partners, groups where you feel safe making mistakes.
That sounds key.
It is. And consciously reframe mistakes. Think of them as learning, not failure. Use positive self-talk. Challenge those negative thoughts when they pop up.
Build resilience.
Exactly. A couple of other practical ideas mentioned were keeping a mistake journal, just noting errors to reflect on, not beat yourself up over. Tracking.
Actively asking for feedback. And starting in low-stakes situations, first maybe one-on-one chats before big group discussions. Build confidence gradually.
It's about creating a positive loop for yourself.
Precisely. Real fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about effective communication and that continuous journey of improvement with the right attitude.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, our deep dive suggests that replying quickly, naturally in English, it's definitely a skill you can build.
Absolutely. It takes focused effort using these kinds of strategies and definitely a positive mindset shift.
The core message really seems to be that consistent, deliberate practice, using those phrases, trying to think in English, working on listening, not fearing mistakes, it all adds up.
It really does. Over time, you'll see real improvements in how fluently you can converse.
And for everyone listening, please remember you absolutely can improve. You can become more confident, more fluent. It just takes putting these ideas into practice and, being patient with yourself.
Yeah, definitely be kind to yourself. So maybe a final thought for you to take away. Looking back at these 6 strategies we discussed, which one, or maybe 2, really clicks with you right now, where you feel you could make a start? And thinking about that, what's one small concrete action you could take, maybe even today, to put that strategy into practice in your very next English conversation?
Good question to ponder.
Yeah, have a think about that. We really hope this deep dive has given you some useful tools and maybe a bit of inspiration to speak more confidently and naturally.